Hello and welcome to episode 635 of the podcast devoted to the classic and sometimes not so classic genre cinema of yesteryear. This is Monster Kid Radio, and I am your writer, host, and producer, Derek M. Cook, welcoming you to this week's show with some more music, because you know we can't have an episode of MKR without a little bit of instrumental surf, and this comes from the band Cannibal Surf. It's from their album Deep Danger. The song is called Action Scene. Go check them out at cannibalsurf.bandcamp.com. Now, the way they spell cannibal is C-A-N-I-B-A-L, and then the word surf.bandcamp.com. Or follow the link in the show notes over at monsterkidradio.net when you're done listening to this week's episode. I'm super excited about this week's episode. We've got a huge episode for you this week. Of course, we have your look at Ultraman with Mark Matzke's Beta Capsule review, and Kenny's look at Famous Monsters of Filmland, where he's going to relay how Famous Monsters of Filmland talked about the movie that we're talking about this week. And the movie we're talking about this week is one that, oh man, okay, I'm going to give you all a heads up right now. Now, this is going to come up multiple times during the conversation. It is what it is. You know, my stance on all of this when it comes to movies from the past that may have some questionable, strike that, reprehensible points of view. We can't whitewash it. We can't sugarcoat it. The truth is, if we ignore the history of Hollywood, it's disrespectful, one, to the filmmakers and the artists involved, but more importantly, to how far we've come since then. And I think it's something we can learn from. So, as you listen to the conversation that I have this week about the Mask of Fu Manchu from 1932, keep all of that in mind. I'm talking about this movie with somebody who really enjoys this film, and despite its racist shortcomings, there are some really cool things in this film, and we're going to talk about those really cool things in this film with a friend of mine, somebody that I've known for years, but as I say in the conversation, somebody who's never been on the show proper. You've heard him in the past when I do recordings from the Lovecraft Film Festival, but you've never heard him this way. We're talking about a man named Scott Glancy. He is a writer, a publisher, a game designer, and a big old fan of all things classic pulp. Well, maybe not all things, the racism and sexism aside, but the good stuff about pulp he's really into, and so am I. So we had a really good time talking about the movie The Mask of Fu Manchu. Watching this movie actually opened my eyes to a number of things, and you know, I don't think this is the first time I'm gonna look at this movie critically. But to get to the next time I talk about this movie, we got to talk about the movie for the first time, and we're going to do that with Scott Glancy here in a few minutes. Also want to give everybody a heads up, I'll mention it again at the end. Next weekend, next Friday in particular, on September 22nd, Monster Kid Radio will be at Rose City Comic-Con. You can find out more about them over at rosecitycomiccon.com. And the reason I bring it up is because we have a panel called Monster Kid Radio Live, a decade of dishing about monsters. It's happening September 22nd at 5 p.m. on the Weird Stage, which is Oregon Ballroom 203 and 204 at Rose City Comic-Con. I can't wait. This is going to be a really good time. It's going to be me, it's going to be my wife Beth, and Chris McMillan is going to be there as well. Chris is a longtime friend of Monster Kid Radio. He's definitely a Monster Kid Radio irregular. You may know him from his website, Shadow Over Portland, or you may know him from his many appearances here on the show, including his appearance on Monster Kid Radio episode number 1, a decade ago. Wow, that's insane to me to be thinking that we've done this for so long, and I see no reason that we're going to be ending anytime soon, especially when we have great conversations like we're about to have with Scott about the movie The Mask of Fu Manchu. Why don't we go ahead and get into all of that, but first, Kenny's look at Famous Monsters of Filmland, and of course, Mark Matzke's Ultraman review, the Beta Capsule review, coming up right now.
Imagine the world around you is nothing but an illusion. Creatures of legend wage endless wars between shadow and light, but you never see it. Even now, dark forces threaten reality as we know it, but most people never know they exist. This is the world I walk in. I am called Byron, and these are my chronicles. The Byron Chronicles, available at ericbusbypresents.com, iTunes, Stitcher, and everywhere else podcasts are available.
I'm going to the ends of the earth to meet the devil himself. And if the devil agrees, we will become partners.
The world will hear from me again.
The Promise of Fu Manchu. A promise to destroy the man who had attempted to destroy him. A man who should fear the vengeance of Fu Manchu.
We know of your desire to build up an empire in which you would command the criminal masterminds of the world. All right. We offer you now this role.
I accept your offer. You in your turn must accept my authority and my leadership. My objective is vengeance. The means, death. At this very moment, some 10,000 miles away from here, my vengeance is about to begin.
Thanks. Good gracious, what are you doing with that thing?
This is the vengeance of Fu Manchu. Vengeance that changes Assistant Commissioner Nayland Smith of Scotland Yard into a compulsive killer.
The face of Nayland Smith, the mind of a murderer.
If Nayland Smith awaits execution for murder, then who is this man being taken on a journey to a remote province of China to await the vengeance of Fu Manchu, starring Christopher Lee, Douglas Wilmer, Sai Chin, Maria Rong, with Noel Trevarthen and Howard Marion Crawford. Protected from the outside world by a mountain barrier, the merciless Fu Manchu plans his revenge. Will violence and terror engulf the whole world? Can no one escape the vengeance of Fu Manchu?
Live from the Land of Light in Nebula M78, home of the mighty Ultra Heroes, it's Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review. Return of Ultraman, Episode 28, Operation Ultra Special Attack. Original air date, October 15th, 1971. Smog blankets Tokyo as Go and Ken test drive their customized hot rod. The car radio reports of a typhoon forming near Saipan. Go soon learns that Monster Attack Team is monitoring the situation because the typhoon abruptly vanished. However, a tornadic event picks up boats and deposits them on a mountain village, and a scientist informs MAT that the ships were damaged by something other than wind. Another typhoon is detected, along with mysterious lights hovering over the water, but MAT's air patrol yields no evidence. While on another test drive, Go, Ken, and Jiro spot Kaiju Varacane. The giant jellyfish rises into the skies, prompting an immediate response from MAT, although Captain Ibuki has reservations about attacking the monster. The crew debates various approaches, finally settling on anesthetizing rockets. But the captain keeps Go at HQ, meaning MAT is on their own against Varacane. The plan fails miserably, and the monster unleashes a Typhoon Force storm, forcing Go to decide if he should remain at his post or bring Ultraman into the fight. Operation Ultra Special Attack is an expertly balanced, finely tuned episode. It manages to spotlight every Monster Attack team member, as well as Ken and Jiro Sakata. It introduces a fascinating monster in Varicane, and the script features brief explorations of environmental themes that have incredible resonance some 51 years later. Perhaps best of all, the special effects are remarkably good. Tsuburaya Productions, at that point, had a track record of creating convincing storm footage, and episode 28 continues that tradition, on a level commensurate with anything being produced in Japan in the early 70s. For Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review, this is Mark Matzke reporting.
Opens its horror vault to release 3 macabre masterpieces. Bela Lugosi as Count Dracula, Lord High Priest of the living dead, begins a legend of fear as he claims the soul of his first victim with the Mark of the Vampire. Boris Karloff as the evil Fu Manchu, his passion for power twisting his brilliant mind as he revels in the horrors of human sacrifice and torture. Behind the Mask of Fu Manchu. Frederick March as the futuristic experimenter Dr. Jekyll, using chemistry to expand his mind, delving into the taboos of the unnatural, to free the primitive, savage, murderer, Mr. Hyde, in the screen's first classic portrayal of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Bela Lugosi, Mark of the Vampire. Boris Karloff, The Mask of Fu Manchu. Frederick March. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Torture, terror, taboo, together in a triple trip to the time when terror began. Now from MGM. Three immortal horrors never seen on the little screen.
A fiendish plan to rule the whole world. Women programmed to kill with a passionate kiss.
Strike.
A kiss with the stinging bite of an asp.
He will become sightless, and then he will die.
Nayland Smith.
A most persistent man. He must be eliminated.
I'm Nayland Smith.
You will destroy him.
Can I help you?
With a kiss of death.
I can't see. I'm blind.
You will seek out my enemies and destroy them.
Kiss and Kill, starring Christopher Lee as Mr. Evil.
The world shall hear from me.
Carl.
President. They will not escape. But in your case, the serpent shall strike you directly on the mouth.
Nayland Smith!
Positively recommended for the strong in heart. Transplants are hard to come by.
1 hour after seeing the fiendish plot of Dr. Fu Manchu,
Excellent.
you'll want to see it again.
Boo-hoo.
I love it. Let's have some fun. Peter Sellers in The Fiendish Plot of Dr. Fu Manchu. The Far East has never been so far out. Rated PG.
Opens Friday, August 8th. Check newspapers for local listings.
Hello there, Monster Kid Radio heads. This is Kenny with a look at Famous Monsters of Filmland. Today we are talking about the 1932 MGM classic Mask of Fu Manchu, starring MKR fave Boris Karloff. Famous Monsters featured this film on the cover of FM 65 from May of 1970. Inside, we find a 12-page, 12-photo film book with a detailed synopsis. It was introduced with this: The Mummy, The Miracle Man, The Old Dark House. These films made 1932 memorable for Boris Karloff, and in the course of that same year he played in 2 Mask movies, Behind the Mask and Fu Manchu. The cast of the MGM horror thriller featured Louis Stone as Nayland Smith, Myrna Loy as Fa Lo Si, Jean Hersholt as Von Berg, Lawrence Grant as Sir Lionel Barton, and Karen Morley as his daughter Sheila, Charles Starrett as Terence Granville, and David Torrance as MacLeod. Original book by Sax Rohmer. The synopsis, not unlike The Mark of the Vampire we looked at earlier this year, was not too close to the actual movie. These MGM horror films were hard to see, so who knows how they wrote the synopsis. At times, it is an exact copy of the dialogue, but the second half of the film is totally out of order, as if they had seen it but struggled to remember the story. Here's an example of where the synopsis is close to the film, but at one point it omits a key word, and later adds a sentence that was not in the movie. He summoned the more powerful of his followers to a banquet, and when they were seated, Fu Manchu rose with majestic calm, and in a respectful silence that fell, he spoke with false, exaggerated humility. I have no son to follow me, and in shame, I ask you to receive and listen to my insignificant daughter, who speaks to you of a vision which has come to her. Fa Lo Si entered to do her father's wishes. The vision was his, not hers, but the impassioned eyes gazing upon her would believe all she had told them. In her sing-song voice, Fa Lo Si dutifully began, I have seen a vision. I have been told that the prophecy is to be fulfilled. Genghis Khan, her voice rang, comes back to us. Genghis Khan, masked in his plate of gold, bearing the scimitar that none but he could ever wield. Cries and shouts denned the air. Then, I have seen the vision of countless hordes swarming to recapture the world. I have seen them victorious. I have heard the groans of dying white men. Genghis Khan comes back, she cried. Genghis Khan leads the East against the world. The white race is doomed. Now let's listen to the movie's dialogue so you can hear the difference.
I have brought you here for great tidings. I am the most unfortunate of men. I have no son to follow me. Therefore, in shame, I ask you to receive a message from my ugly and insignificant daughter.
I've seen a vision of countless hordes swarming to recapture the world. I've seen them victorious. I've heard the shouts of the dead and the dying drowned by the victorious cries of our people. Genghis Khan comes back. Genghis Khan leads the East against the world.
Needless to say, these FM film books weren't always such spoilers. When you finally see the movie, there are many surprises. As I have said before, for many years, FM was the only source of any knowledge about films like Mask of Fu Manchu, for us Boris Karloff fans. We loved it, even when we discovered later in life it was filled with errors. That is all for this week's look at Famous Monsters of Filmland. We will have more next time. For MKR, this is Kenny saying adios.
The world shall hear from me again.
The Master of Menace keeps his word, returning in a great new thriller. Sax Rohmer's The Brides of Fu Manchu.
I am Fu Manchu.
And this is his international harem of horror. Pawns in a game whose stakes are the highest in the world. The world itself.
They've kidnapped 11 women in 18 months in 10 different countries, Petrie.
A far-flung, murderous organization trained to stop at nothing.
He's won every round.
But he must not win the last one. Excitement electrifies the screen as an alerted world goes into all-out action. Sax Rohmer's The Brides of Fu Manchu.
A further warning to humanity. If the governments of all the nations do not accept my terms, in 4 days' time, I will bring desolation to mankind.
The Castle of Fu Manchu.
The signal isn't getting through. Strengthen the signal. No! Do as I say! Strengthen it!
In his eternal fight to dominate the world, Fu Manchu has discovered a new and horrifying weapon with which to demonstrate his power.
Fu Manchu is only interested in destruction. But what can we do to save Professor Heracles? I believe it's a question of saving the world, Dr. Kessler.
Although the greatest, Nayland Smith is not the only enemy of Fu Manchu.
She fights like a man.
She is Omar Pasha's favorite. We must kill her.
Take her away.
For the most devilish part of his plan, the many arms of Fu Manchu reach out across continents to bring unwilling assistance to the castle of Fu Manchu.
Bring forth the 2 prisoners.
Christopher Lee as the dreaded Dr. Fu Manchu. Sai Chin as his sadistic daughter, Lin Tan. Marie Percy as his most vulnerable victim. Richard Green as Nayland Smith, his arch-enemy from Scotland Yard.
I need Heracles to complete my plans. I need him alive, conscious, coherent. Therefore, you will operate. If I refuse, then Dr. Ingrid Koch will die an extremely painful death. Flood the tunnels! If disaster is to be avoided, I shall insist on complete cooperation. I shall give no further warning. In 14 days from now, I shall strike.
This is Count Vlad, but you may recognize me by my more familiar name, Count Dracula. And I'm here to offer you a friendly warning. Derek and his guests often get excited, and occasionally this results in revealing key plot points of the movies they're discussing. In your parlance, you might call these revelations spoilers. You know how the children of the night, monster kids, can get sometimes. So consider yourself warned. And don't come begging to me to kill them for their transgressions afterward. I have more pressing issues to take care of, like that pesky Van Helsing.
Listeners, I'd like to welcome to the show somebody that you've heard on the podcast in the past, but always in a slightly different fashion, in that he's been involved in panels that I've been involved with at the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival over the years. But he's never been on the show in this fashion, and it's somebody that I've wanted to have on the show in a long time. He's one of my favorite people that I've met through the Lovecraft Film Festival. He is a role-playing game designer and publisher and writer. I'd like to welcome to the show Scott Glancy. How you doing, sir?
I am great. I am thrilled to finally be on Monster Kid Radio. This is something I've been looking forward to for a while. I love the work you're doing, delving into these horror classics that people might have missed. You've got to get your foundations right before you move on to Saw. You know, none of that means anything until you see some of the first death traps, which I guess I accidentally made an appropriate reference here, because we are going to be talking about a film that has some of the earliest, most off-the-wall, crazy death traps that could possibly be concocted by the minds of deranged Hollywood writers.
The film is 1932's The Mask of Fu Manchu, starring a patron saint of Monster Kid Radio, Boris Karloff. And as I was watching it this morning, to follow up on what you just said, Beth came out and sat down, and just as they're strapping one of the characters to one of these death traps, and then it cuts to another scene where there's another death trap being implemented, and she just looks at the screen and says, well, they're certainly creative. So,
yeah, a lot happens in this film in an hour and 8 minutes or something. It's like a TV episode plus, and we've got kidnapping by mummies, at least 2 horrifying death traps, 1 attempted human sacrifice, at least 2 murders that I can think of off the top of my head, including a 3rd scientific murder, murder to create zombie formula, 1 zombie formula, a death ray massacre, at least 1 fist fight, a camel chase, archaeology, a race around the globe to find the artifacts. It's unbelievable how much they cram in just an hour and 8 minutes. The thing doesn't stop to take its breath ever.
Not at all. And I was shocked that it's not a Universal picture. It's got all the trappings of like a Universal serial because of all the world hopping and the archaeology and the action, but it's not from Universal at all. And I was kind of shocked when I discovered that, or realized that while I was watching the movie this time around. I think I just kind of assumed it was Universal.
Yeah, well, MGM was clearly trying to compete with things like Dracula and Frankenstein, which had come out just year before or the same year. Mm-hmm. So they'd scooped up Boris for the express purpose of coming up with sort of a cinematic, I guess you'd call it a grand guignoir, like is that the term from the French where they talk about those really bloody, heavy-duty, bloody splash zone stage plays that would be extra bloody and extra lewd. And this thing is made before the Hays Code, so it is full of the sex and violence and sexy violence and violent sex. It goes to places that movies are not going to go to for another 30 years, maybe 35 years.
I love watching pre-code films. I really do. They're subversive, but usually in the most delightful of ways. And there's stuff that happens in this that you would not see happening once the Hays Code kicks in. Of all the things that you've mentioned, we just kind of hit the tip of the iceberg there. There's a minor dismemberment. There's a lot of casual racism gets thrown around. There's a lot of stuff happening here. And all the things that you and I just mentioned, not all of it's by the bad guys. I mean, there's stuff happening here.
There's some moments in this film where, I actually start to question. There's a moment where I was like, who's the bad guys here? Do we sum up what the plot of the film is before we go on? We're so excited. We're just getting into the details.
I think with this one, a lot of times most people have seen the movies, but this is one that I don't think gets talked about a lot. And there might be a reason for that. The racist overtones, the yellow face, the yellow peril, all of that.
There's no racist overtones. It's just stupidly racist. It is just mind-bogglingly racist. I mean, they open up the film where Nayland Smith, agent of the British Empire, is discussing, what would happen if Fu Manchu gets to the tomb of Genghis Khan first and recovers the artifacts of Genghis Khan's golden scimitar and golden mask, things that never existed. And all the East will rise I fear for the future of the white race. I mean, he just right off the bat says something like that, and you're like, wait, what? I saw a line at the beginning of the film. I didn't see a bunch of dudes in white pointy hoods. What's going on here? Right from the beginning. Even here's the thing: I've read Sax Rohmer. Sax Rohmer's Fu Manchu books are plenty racist. This movie's more racist than Sax Rohmer.
I don't have a lot of experience with Sax Rohmer's fiction, the writing, so I didn't know how it compares.
To me, it's a little bit like, when Robert E. Howard is telling H.P. Lovecraft, hey, dude, maybe you should tone it down a little bit. I think you're pushing and Robert E. Howard, who wrote Conan, was absolutely a guy who wrote stuff that was like, okay, race is determinant of character and destiny. He absolutely believes that, so his Celtic Irish blood somehow gives him a leg up in the world of being a warrior poet. But even he's like, oh, Howard, come on. It ain't like that. This feels like the same way. It's like they dialed this up to 11. And the thing is, though, it is so ridiculous. It is just the subject of, it's just ridicule. I mean? It feels like the subject of ridicule at this point. If they had made this to make fun of racists and racist attitudes at the time, they could have done a better job. And I think one of the reasons that the racism is dialed up, Fu Manchu says, I'm going to dispose of your entire accursed white race at some point, send you to your cold, clean, antiseptic heaven or whatever it was.
Right.
Yeah, a saintly heaven. All that seems like it is affected by some genuine pop culture that was going on at the time a little earlier. Like, it's 32, but in the 1920s, there were a number of pop history, pop sociology or whatever writers who were writing things about the decay and descent of the white race and the rise of the Asiatic horde. The Yellow Peril scare was still ongoing, even though that's really from an earlier period. It was getting revived during the 1920s. And I wish I could remember the names of some of these books, but there's even a moment in The Great Gatsby, the version that has Robert Redford and Bruce Dern and Karen Black, and suddenly forgotten the name of the actress from Rosemary's Baby who's in it. But there's a moment where Bruce Dern is talking about, blah, 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 the white race, blah, 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 blah. I've read it in this book, and he starts throwing out the titles. You should read it, Tom. It's really important that you know about the future of the white race. And the reason he's got Bruce Dern talking about that is to extra demonstrate that Bruce Dern's character is the worst person in the world. That's just what F. Scott Fitzgerald is doing there. These attitudes in these books were extremely popular, and I think may have helped color the more overt race war characteristics of the plot. But that's just me speculating wildly.
I don't know much about the writing of, or lack of writing of this. Some of the research that I've done seems to indicate there wasn't a lot of writing done other than putting some pages in front of Boris while he's in the makeup chair and saying, now, here's your script for the day.
I will also note there is no connection with the book. The Mask of Fu Manchu, there's no connection. That one has nothing to do with the tomb of Genghis Khan and everything to do with Egyptology.
Okay.
That one is, yes, there is Egyptology in it, and Sir Lionel Barton does appear as the archaeologist who is featured in the book significantly, but his character basically is this jerk who has pilfered like a Chinese tomb or something, or he's taken some artifact that Fu wants back and has run off with it, and is, by refusing to give up what he has stolen, he's putting everybody in danger. It's really weird. Fu doesn't come off necessarily as the bad guy. He's like, yes, I've totally got your daughter suspended over a pit of scorpions, but all you have to do to save her is give her back the thing you stole. And Barton dithers. Well, I could make another daughter. Yeah, he's not great. He wants other people to go, well, you should go save my daughter. Oh, should I? Okay. So Nayland Smith and Dr. Petrie have to go fix the problem that Barton has created. And Dr. Petrie does not exist in the movie either. He was always Nayland Smith's Watson. Nayland Smith was always the Sherlock Holmes stand-in. And he always had Dr. Petrie as his biographer, as his chronicler, who would tell the stories in the same way that Watson did. And that character doesn't appear in the movie at all. So there's vast differences from the book, and vast differences from, even Sax Romer's use of yellow apparel to scare the heck out of Middle America and the British middle class.
So this is not the first Fu Manchu movie. It had been done a couple of times before, and it would be done. Christopher Lee did, 6 Fu Manchu films later, of varying quality.
As much as I love Christopher Lee, I find his Fu Manchu films almost unendurable. They look cheap, especially compared to this thing.
This one is gorgeous. I was going to say, of the ones that I've seen, this one is the most fun to look at. And I hate to use the word fun or anything positive about when I describe this movie because of all the racism.
Yeah.
It's a fun, lush movie. Like I said, it felt like a Universal serial with some of the set pieces and the design of where they're at. The big temple scene, the torture chamber scenes.
The British Museum scene.
Yes.
Where they go to the British Museum and there's all this stuff on the walls. In fact, they're sitting there having this discussion at one point, and I'm looking over the scientist's shoulder and like, is that a stuffed Yeti? There's like a stuffed Yeti on the back wall. There's all this stuff that, like, you know, it'll be like going in and like, over here's the Ark of the Covenant just piled in a corner along with that little golden Mayan statue and maybe the Cup of Christ. You know, it's all piled up in the back from all their other adventures, you know. And they're ignoring it now, and it's gathering dust because it's not important. And then they go to that gigantic topographical map of Asia where the guy has to go up a step ladder with a pointer to describe their route across this huge topographical map of Asia. And it looks so good. And I'm just like, what am I looking at? Where, you know, because the first scene that opens in Nayland Smith's office is just this shot of his desk.
Mm-hmm.
As it's sitting there, and the guy comes in and sits down, the camera doesn't move. It just sits there. Kind of like is it Todd Brown did Dracula? Who did Dracula?
Yeah, Todd Browning.
Tom Browning's Dracula, where his camera is just static in that film. That's what I remember. Anyways, I don't know if that's true, but I just remember his camera didn't move. He filmed a stage play. And it starts off like this camera's not going to move. And then suddenly it sweeps into the desk on Nayland Smith, you know, as he's filling in Sir Lionel Barton about how they've got to find these lost artifacts, race the bad guy to the artifacts, because, gee, that didn't sell a lot of tickets in 1981 for George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, right?
Right.
And suddenly the camera starts moving, and it kind of never stops. It's constantly doing things. The camera becomes in motion, and I'm really it's not as much as the Germans in the same period. The German cameras, like in movies like M, their camera's going all over the place. It's like a character.
Mm-hmm.
But he starts immediately like, okay, this is just going to be like your expected silent film. Nope. We're going to move the camera. We're going to do all kinds of cool shots. It just goes from there. The cinematography is unbelievable.
Yes.
The lighting, you know, like the guy walks through the hallway, this giant shadow gets bigger and bigger on the wall as he walks into Fu's inner chamber, you know. The set design is lush and gorgeous, this insane combination of like Art Deco and weird Orientalism filtered through the expectations of Hollywood writers who've never been to the Far East in their lives. You know, the sets are gorgeous. The costumes are gorgeous. We haven't even gotten to the Strickfaddening. This film's Strickfadden's hard.
Which is another reason why I thought it was a Universal picture the first time I saw it, because Strickfadden, you know, you think Strickfadden, you think Frankenstein's Lab, you think all of that stuff, but no, there's some Strickfadden stuff happening here, and he even appears on camera.
Performing an insane stunt.
Yeah.
There is a sequence of the film that in order to validate or check off, make sure it's the real sword of Genghis Khan, Boris in full Fu gear with these long metal fingers attached over the ends of his fingers, puts the sword down, stabs it into the earth in front of a giant Tesla coil. And they turn it on and they lower the lights on the set because this isn't a cell effect. This isn't them drawing on the film cell or doing a double exposure. They just turn on a Tesla coil. And electricity arcs through the air, but you can see it better with the lights down. So they turn the lights down, electricity arcs through the air, and then he moves forward and he catches the arc of the electricity on the tip of his metal fingers and then teases it through the air until he can bring the electricity to the hilt of the sword to test it. And they do this sequence twice, once with a sword that is a fake and melts, and once with the real sword. That's Strickfadden in the Fu suit doing the stunt with live electricity soaring through the air, just inches from burning his face off. And yet, okay, we're just going to have this dangerous thing. And, there's Myrna Loy as Fu's daughter standing 20 feet back or whatever from this, and Charles Starrett standing back there being Hank Handsome, basically, where his character is just good looking and pretty much good for nothing else in the whole film. They do some unbelievable, dangerous freaking stunts in this film. And that one might be the worst, but there's more to come, kids.
Yeah.
There's more to come.
Scott kind of mentioned earlier, and that basically is the sum up of the story here. There are some artifacts, Genghis Khan artifacts, quote unquote. Fu Manchu wants them because they're going to enable him to eliminate the white race, and our European heroes are going to have to stop him. And I love the moment in the British Museum when the mummies, I guess, people dressed up as mummies, emerge from these sarcophagi and attack and kidnap Sir Barton. And I loved that.
Gagging him with their wrappings.
I love that moment. That was so cool.
And tying him up with their own wrappings.
That's so cool. Cool. And this is before Karloff did the mummy. So we get some mummy action in a Karloff flick before he put the wrappings on himself. It's fantastic. That sequence is so cool. I want to see that in other things. I want to use that in my own stories now. I love it.
There's a moment where one of the guy's the head wrap slips as he's coming up from behind Martin. He has to catch it. And
yes. Yep.
All I can think of is the stormtrooper coming through the door and bonking his head.
Bonking his head?
Yeah, it's exactly what it looks like to me. They do a good job of bringing some of Sax Rohmer's ridiculous death traps that could only have been imagined by a fiendish mind of the Orient. Dude, you thought it up. You're Sax Rohmer. None of this stuff existed in Asia. You made it up. It was from
This is all you, buddy.
It was a fiendish mind of a guy from England. Okay, so don't even start with that. And right at the kidnapped by mummies. Then the sequence where they find the top of the tomb and they lift the lid off the top of the tomb, just like the workers lifting the opening off the Well of Souls in Raiders.
I saw so much Raiders of the Lost Ark in this.
And they build the scaffold and lower the guy down on the rope into the tomb, just like Indy descending into the Well of Souls. Although it's shorter, it's only like a 10-foot drop into the thing. But I'm like, holy cow, did Steve and George see this at some point? Of course, their archaeology is just teacup bulldozer archaeology.
Yeah, it's pretty typical of we're just going to go in and break everything that we don't think is valuable and take the gold out. Oh, it's so bad. And they even reference Carter's expedition briefly, the King Tut stuff.
They break a seal. They get a giant sword, and they're breaking the seal. And as he breaks this 700-year-old artifact, he's like, oh, get those pieces. I'm like, oh, you broke it, dude.
The only thing we didn't see is them finding a mummy and standing on it to feel how cool it is when it collapses underneath their feet. It's the only thing we're missing here. This kind of, like you said, bulldozing through. It's... Oh.
They strip the garments off of Genghis Khan's skeleton and they leave his skeleton behind. Like Genghis Khan, recovering the body of Genghis Khan would be an amazing archaeological find. They're like, yep, get the mask, get the sword, get out of here. Like Conan jerking the sword. Even Conan took the sword from the Atlantean king with more care and reverence than these guys strip, grave rob Genghis Khan. And strangely, let's point out, how is Genghis Khan arranged? He looks just like the Atlantean king. Yet Conan finds in the 81 Conan the Barbarian atop, holding his sword, sitting atop a throne in his grave. And when they have to chase the workers out of the tomb, what do? Well, we're in a Price is Ancient, let's shoot our guns in the air to make them leave the room quicker. I'm just like,
what are you doing? It's so bad. It's so bad, but so typical. There's like a throwaway line earlier. I hate to destroy something like this. Okay, now do it. But then later on, even Sir Barton... When Fu Manchu asks him, what are you going to do with these artifacts? Well, the British people might like to look at them on their holiday.
Yes, that's what your cultural history, that's what the grave goods of your greatest, most powerful leader mean to us. It's bank holidays, entertainment. There's nothing on the internet in 1932 or cable, so I guess we'll go look at this. And they just keep throwing the word Chinaman out, left, right, and center.
Yeah, they really do.
They really do. And they throw that word around a lot in this film. I'm starting to wonder if Fu's not the good guy here, trying to at least preserve his culture, his nation's cultural heritage before these Europeans run off with it and sell tickets at 5 pence or 2 a look, For the farthing, we'll let you touch the skeleton.
Oh, boy. Again, like I said, Beth came in and caught the end of it while I was watching it this morning. And not to get too far ahead, but at the end of the movie, when they're trying to dispose of the sword so nobody else can get it, Beth just said, why don't you just put it in the British Museum? They never give anything back anyway.
It is an active crime scene,
Yes.
Well, clearly the British Museum is insecure because it's chock full of assassins dressed as mummies.
True.
And again, some of the deaths in this are just absolutely amazing. We get Lionel Barton, our archaeologist, tortured, the torture of the bell, where he is strapped under a giant cathedral-sized bell, can't move, and Boris says it. You won't be able to sleep. You won't be able to eat. You won't be able to drink. You'll be unspeakably thirsty. You'll be unspeakably foul. And I'm like, did Boris just say he's going to poop himself? I think Boris just said, we're going to leave you there in your own poop. Oh, my God. And he's kept awake for like 5 days with the bell ringing over him, just some variant of the Chinese water torture or something.
And it's not an automated process. There are 2, I guess, slaves. They're ringing the bell above him. I felt bad for those guys, too.
They have to be deaf. They, of course, I deafened them with needles so that they would be perfect for this one purpose, because that would be fiendishly. That would be fiendishly oriental. But yeah, he's got these guys whose only job is to ring the bell, pull the clapper with these giant ropes, and gong. And as they leave Barton strapped under the gong belt, they cut to the stock footage of the camels going across the desert in the Gobi Desert. And I was actually pleased that when they do show the camels up close in a couple of shots, they're actually the Asian dromedaries with 2 humps.
Oh, okay.
They actually got that right. I was like, oh, cool. That's unnecessarily accurate in a film that is just wildly inaccurate about all things Asian. But okay, nice.
Hey, nice, yeah.
Yes, when they send a message to the archaeologists, you better cooperate by throwing Sir Lionel Barton's severed hand over the wall, and it comes bouncing down the limbs of the tree to land at the guy's feet. He's like, does this mean Sir Lionel's dead? And the messenger from Fu is like, no, my master is quite skilled at surgery. Just like, it is filled with good stuff, but at the same time, like, ooh, yeah, whatever. Yeah. The only person to pull off the exoticness, the beauty, the gorgeousness, the rich sumptuousness that we want to see in that kind of old-timey villain was Carpenter with James Hong in Big Trouble in Little China.
I was thinking about that.
David O. Pan does not, to me, come off as a straight-up Asian stereotype. Not when he says things like, okay, this really pisses me off to no end.
Right.
That performance had all the trappings, to me, of Fu Manchu, and none of the racism. I don't feel like it did. Maybe because it's not aimed at me, I'm not noticing as a white.
Yeah, we're a couple of white guys, so our perspective might be a little different, but I never got the impression that Carpenter was being exploitive about it.
Mm-hmm.
He seemed to be respectful about it.
He wanted that sumptuousness that you get from, like, was it wuxia, the flying wire stuff from Hong Kong in the 80s, and he really got it, including, being able to take it back to, like, so much of that wuxia's set in the 17th century,
Mm-hmm.
And he was able to, or even earlier, Warring States period when they're doing their sort of swords and sorcery, I guess, stuff. And so he was able to put one foot in the ancient past with swords and sorcery and one foot in modern Hong Kong action, and with another. And it works brilliantly. And there's elements of this film that feels like, oh, wow, they're really getting towards that. And then it's like, oops, darn, it's racist again. The only good news about the racism to me is the only people that actually makes look bad are Hollywood writers.
True. I don't blame and I don't fault, the performers here. And it's easy to kind of wave our hands and say, it's of its time, and it kind of was. And they all, I hate to say it because it sounds like I'm justifying it, but they all did it. Lugosi did it. Peter Lorre did it. I mentioned Christopher Lee. A lot of the classic horror actors that we talk about here on the show have done this. Karloff would do it again with the Mr. Wong movies.
You know what my favorite race-bending performance is of all time? It's not Linda Hunt in, because she's not only gender-bent, but she also race-bent for Year of Living Dangerously and got an Oscar for it. We gave out an Oscar for somebody doing Yellowface very recently.
Yeah.
Very recently. My favorite is Noble Johnson. You guys have all seen him because you've watched King Kong, right? He's the tribal chieftain in both King Kong and Son of Kong and other movies. And then with the same director, he is Count Zaharoff's Cossack assistant in The Most Dangerous Game.
And he's brilliant in that.
They put a beard on him and they white-faced him up, and he is his villainous Cossack giant who is his enforcer. And that to me is just hilarious because if we want to play, we have a giant guy, he's on contract, but dude, he's not white. He can't play a Cossack. The hell he can't. Call the makeup department. We've got him on contract for 3 more films. He's, I loved working with, and it's the same director. So, he's like, yeah, he was cool working with him in Kong. Let's put him to work in Most Dangerous Game. I don't care.
Yeah.
There is that aspect to it.
Yep.
Myrna Loy and Karloff Yellowface it up, and so does I don't remember the actor who plays Fu's assistant, Goilo Sung, played by E. Alan Warren, who is the sort of the greebly assistant who comes by and interacts with some of the main characters. He's also in Yellowface, but apart from that, there are a ton of Asian actors involved in various places. I think the Chief Cooley is another appears to be another Anglo actor, only because he's so heavily made up for the couple of scenes we get close-ups of him. But there are a ton of Asian actors, and the weird thing is, including some Indians or South Asians, maybe, there's a couple of scenes where, Fu's having the big meeting of all of the scary Asian types to frighten Middle America. There's like Indian princes and Burmese chieftains and Chinese warlords, and they're having what appears to be 2 Japanese guys fight with katanas in the middle of the dinner party, to the death, just as, some light entertainment for the thing. And, as they're doing this, and Fu's at the front of the room, at this big table flanked by a turbaned Arabic caliph or sultan. Everyone who's not, white they're all connected. They all know each other. They all hang out in the same places, obviously, and they're all getting together to do us wrong. That's what the film is selling. And at the same time, you're looking at that nonsense going, well, that's terrible. But you're like, wait a minute, look at this set. Look at these costumes. Look, the interior of the tomb, that door where the 2 arms of the 2 guardian demons cross. The demon on one door, its hand goes across to the demon on the other, and then vice versa. And it's also sumptuous. Fu's lab he's got a death ray.
He's got a death ray, and that.
He's got a death ray, and I'm just like, that is also gorgeous and fantastic and pulpy. But boy, it brings all of Pulp's warts. There's no doubt about it. It shows you the ugly Pulp warts that come with all the gorgeous high adventure and the exotic locations and the strange and different people that you're never going to meet in the Midwest when you're reading through your copy of Amazing Stories or Adventure or whatever your Pulp magazine is. And again, just beautiful. The guy who was the art director on this is a guy named Cedric Gibbons. And there's this weird scene where Fu has his evil lab, and he's going to put the zombie mind control formula into Hank Handsome, into Terry, and who is strapped to the table in a loincloth, okay, which is it's a bit much right there to start with. But as he's gathering up all of his strange Asiatic animals and extracting their venom, like Gila monsters, tarantulas, rattlesnakes, things like that.
All the things you find in China or Japan or what other Asian country.
Yes,
yeah, of
right
course.
Right out of the jungles of South. The Gila monster, famous from the jungles of French Indochina.
Yeah, of course.
He's gathering all this up and he's mixing them all in beakers and Erlenmeyer flasks. And one of my favorite parts is he has to partially filter the poison by injecting it into one of his servants who horribly dies. And then they re-extract it after they've injected it into him. And then he just has them go, take him away, Then, again, just off the wall mad science. And then, standing behind Fu, for some reason in this lab, are these round cylindrical pedestals. And there's like 5 of them. And on top, this is going to sound insane to say it out loud, but on top of every cylindrical pedestal standing there is this bald, muscular black guy in a loincloth standing with his arms crossed. And many of his servants are these bald, muscular black guys in loincloths, again, which you find all over China,
Sure, sure.
But they're all standing there on top of these pedestals with their arms crossed, being all muscular and bald. And I'm like, what? That's weird. That looks like an Oscar. Well, the art director for this movie, Cedric Gibbons, designed the Oscar award. So, whoa, dude. You might be telling on yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like Tarantino with one too many shots of feet. You may have shown us more about yourself than perhaps you really meant to. But this film it has all the violence, and we got to get to the other horrible death traps, but it brings all the sex because, you had Myrna Loy.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to get some femme fatale at this time. I mean, she doesn't really break her femme fatale streak until she gets into the Thin Man movies with Power.
And I love those movies. Those are great. And I love Myrna Loy, but she's sexing it up here pretty hard.
Oh, yeah. There's a bit where Fu offers her as a bribe if you'll just tell us where the tomb of Genghis Khan is. When she gets her hands on Terry, Hank Handsome, as soon as he walks into the room, she sits up straight and like, ooh, what's for supper? And when he gets grabbed and they stick a dowel in his teeth and drag him away to the dungeons, she scurries after, has him hung by his wrists while these 2, again, half-naked black guys rip his shirt off down to the waist and pick up whips. And then she's like, the whips! And they go get the whips. And then they're beating him with the whips. And she's like, faster, faster! I'm like, what am I watching exactly? And then she makes this weird little cry while they're beating him. And I'm like, oh my.
Yeah.
Maybe the Hays Code exists for a reason, man. And then once he's properly, tenderized, she has him brought back to her boudoir. I'm like, wow. I could see there could have been a riot in Topeka. They showed this in Duluth, they might have burned the theater down because there's this, she's supposed to be an Asian woman, a Chinese woman, macking on this white guy. That's already dubious. But she had 2 black guys beat the living daylights out of him in a weirdly sexualized way. Just total turnaround from the classic, what we think of happening down in the plantation days, and I'm just like, whoa, what is, okay, you guys need looking after. They're clearly whoever's responsible for this, and apparently like you're saying, they'd bring these pages to Myrna Loy, and she's like, whoa, oh, okay, this is a lot.
Oh man,
it has all the sex and all the violence that you could ask for. Heck, they even do a great job throwing a knife into somebody's back.
Yeah,
and that one shot where the assassin dangling from a wire outside your window with one hand throws a knife into the archaeologist's back. I think that literally was thrown into his back. I mean, it doesn't look, if it's sprung out, if it's a prop handle that's sprung out.
It looked really good. It looked really good.
It looked like, okay, actor, we're just going to put this padding on your back. And then Bob over here, who's a professional knife thrower, really? Are we going to do that?
Don't move. Action. What? Shut up. Okay.
That's what I mean. Considering some of the later stuff, it's like
we got to talk about the death traps because there are alligators involved and they're real. And yeah.
Oh yeah. The one thing they do is they take our German archaeologist von Berg, and he gets strapped down in this very Art Deco room, which
it looks like something out of the Black Cat. It looks so cool.
Yes, that's what I thought too. I thought it was like right out of the Black Cat. And this He's strapped down where he's sitting on this like silver cylindrical bench that he's strapped to, and he can turn around, but he can't stand up. And on either side of him, these two enormous, flat, stainless steel walls, that are like 4 feet tall, but he's forced to sit down. And they've got these enormous, like 3 to 4 foot long spiked walls, that are coming at him to impale him in the middle. And the walls even have a little place in it where it could like pass over the stool, like it would the stool get in the way, so they can get all the spikes into Von Berg. And it's got this giant like hydraulic arms that are running it. It's not like some servants turning a crank. It's like this thing where he turns it, there's this thrum. And the spikes get closer and closer as he's looking this way and that. And I keep thinking about that scene in the Venture Brothers. There's an episode called Escape from the House of Mummies where you show up at episode 3. Like they just show up in media res, and the Venture Brothers are trapped in a room with spikes. The walls are closing in, and then the spikes come out of the walls, and Brock Sam's like, okay, they're doing it old school here. How are we gonna get out of this? I was like, okay, they convince Dr. Venture to call his tenant, the guy who's the magician. But he's like, Dr. Morpheus. And he calls him up on the phone. He's like, hello, Morpheus, it's your landlord. Yeah, I'm trapped in a cliche. He's like, spiked walls. Like, says Morpheus. How fast are they moving? Well, they're slower than Evil Funhouse spiked walls, but faster than Mad Scientist spiked walls. Yeah, I think we all understand what he's saying.
Yeah, yeah.
And sure enough, so yeah, the room of the long, slim silver fingers, I believe is how.
Yeah, I think that's what they called them. And I actually think I like that better than the alligator room. I thought it was kind of just the way it was constructed and the look and the sound.
It's so weird and antiseptic and not at all medieval. It looks industrial.
Yeah,
I liked it better than. Is it a room with closing walls from The Raven?
Yeah,
that Bella gets stuck in at the end of the film.
Yep.
But those walls didn't have spikes.
No, they didn't. This one we upped the ante a little bit. Yeah,
slow moving spikes, so you can be slowly impaled from every direction at once. And then the second death trap, which is even more bonkers. You think, okay, that's bonkers, right? That's bonkers. No. The writing staff hasn't even begun to get bonkers. So you get in, and Nayland Smith is dragged into this room, and it's got like this teeter-totter, right? That's shaped like a dragon. Like there's like a dragon's head and a tail at one end, and then it's got in the middle. There's this the fulcrum, and he's strapped down on it with his head at one end. At the other end is this big bag of sand. And it's like this room with stone walls, right?
And this is where Beth walked in this morning, during this scene. So
the guys strap him down. They disconnect the 2 ropes that keep the teeter-totter balanced, right? And they leave him like that. And they walk out of the room. As soon as they close the door, the floor splits in 2 around the teeter-totter and starts to open up, revealing a pit of live alligator, just wall to wall angry suitcases that don't want to be there today, that have been dragged to the studio by whatever alligator farm MGM keeps on contract so they can make Tarzan movies, or I guess that's Universal. I don't know. It's just wall to wall live alligators, and it's not like they do some rubber snakes in this movie. There are some rubber snakes.
There are some rubber snakes, but these are live alligators.
These are live alligators, and the guy strapped to it, as the sand runs out of the one end, it starts to tip his head into the freaking alligators. I'm just like, this is everything from the, Dad, aren't we going to stay and watch and make sure he dies? No, son, we're just going to close the door and assume everything goes to don't you know anything about being a supervillain? It's right out of the Dr. Evil playbook of just overly elaborate, slow-moving death traps that they're not even going to bother to hang out and make sure it works, because Fu's got other things to do while this is happening.
Oh, yeah. He's got the assembly of every Asian person in the area.
Yeah.
Assembling to watch the presentation of the mask and the sword.
Yeah. and the girl. And
oh man, yeah.
I before we get on the girl, I gotta say just Nayland Smith escapes from this death trap by chewing through his bonds, and then and I hesitate to call him a stuntman because he's just a guy in a room full of alligators. The guy in his jodhpurs, in his adventure outfit with the epaulettes and sort of safari-looking outfit, and the tall boots, he gets set on the edge of the pedestal in this room full of alligators, and then literally runs across the backs of live, annoyed alligators who open their mouths and thrash their tails as he steps on their backs in one take and runs and jumps onto the stone wall and starts climbing up the stone wall.
He pitfalls his way across the room and then grabs the wall and starts climbing up. It's like, dude.
There's no rules, apparently. There's no law.
No.
It's abusing the alligators. The stuntman could just get the living crap, bitten out of him or whatever. And they're action. And I mean, if it doesn't work, make sure you get it on camera, I guess,
Yeah.
But sure enough, he runs across the back of live alligators, kids, before crawling out of the pit and then going to cause trouble and rescue Von Berg and rescue
when they
Terry.
go to rescue Von Berg, when they walk into the room of the Silver Fingers or whatever, they seem like they were just kind of taking their time. There was no sense of urgency. They just kind of stroll over to the device and turn it off. It's like, dude, he's about to get... Come on. A little bit of pep in your step here, dude.
Moved with a purpose, all right? I know how to turn this off. Like they know, well, you just turn this dial here. I'm like, I don't know how to stop this thing. I have no idea how to turn it off. Nayland Smith's like, no problem, I got this,
Yeah,
and I mean, certainly they have no trouble turning on Fu's death ray at the end. So clearly, somebody has given them the cheat code to the entire Fu empire.
Right, yeah. Nayland Smith did some homework beforehand and studied up on how this whole thing works. So they're going to sacrifice the woman because that's what you have to do to start the Asian uprising, I guess. I don't know.
Sacrifice her to our gods. And I'm like, dude, you're Chinese. Which gods are you talking about? Like, what, Buddha? They've got some Art Deco Buddhas hanging out in this place, too.
That's not how Buddha plays. I don't know what you're thinking here, but I do like that, Fu Manchu makes this whole speech, and at one point, if I am worthy, I'll be granted this. And then the statue itself moves and gives the sword to him.
Oh, yeah.
That was amazing.
Yeah, and they never clear up whether this is a parlor trick that Fu has created in order to fool his gullible, what do they say at the beginning of the film? Will we ever understand these Asiatic minds? Yeah. That he's somehow fooling these simple people or something. Or is this the statue of Genghis Khan literally granting its blessing to Fu to, start the Mongol murder machine up again? Because say what you like about Genghis Khan, that dude changed the actuarial tables for all of Asia and good chunks of Europe, and didn't do the Middle East any favors either. I mean, we're all upset about how Attila the Hun mussed our hair in Europe when he came through, but the Mongols did things to Damascus and Baghdad that won't be repeated until we drop Fat Man and Little Boy on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's pretty amazing the damage those guys did, one at a time with sword strokes, making a population tear their city to the ground and then executing the entire population who survived the process of tearing down Baghdad. So anyways, enough of real history. Back to silliness. I had forgotten about the giant statue turning and handing him the sword, and I'm seeing it again. I was just like, oh yeah.
And I loved that. Like you said, we don't know if it's Fu Manchu and his showmanship and it's a trick, because he's clearly capable of building death traps. He could have built an automaton of some sort or had a guy in makeup, whatever. Or is it really something from the supernatural realm happening here? And I loved that they left it open.
Yeah. Now, his speech about conquering the world.
Oh, boy. Yeah. This is...
This is a lot. this leads us to the line, which is just the most unforgettable. Did Boris really just say that line in the whole movie? Where, having gestured to our female lead, Sheila Barton, the daughter of the archaeologist, played by a woman named Karen Morley, he gestures to this blonde woman who, I want to point out that when Fu goes, "We're going to sacrifice you," she doesn't do anything. She is not Karen Allen. Okay?
Yeah.
She doesn't, she doesn't start biting and scratching and kicking and beating these guys with her shoes or anything like that. She just does this whole, "I'm ready," like she's going to be some literally Christian martyr, where she just I don't believe she's tied to the altar. I remember looking down and she's got one hand over her head, and the other hand like on her side. And I'm like, where are the bonds? You could just get out of the way of the sword, dude. Why are you just laying there like a limp rag?
She's wilted. She's just done. And I don't...
I want to circle back to her a little bit after this, but
okay.
He says to the assembled horde, I guess is the correct term of art for when you get a bunch of Asian people together in racist 1932. He turns to the horde and says, "Would you not have wives like this for yourselves?" And they all go, "Yeah!" And then he says, "Conquer and breed. Kill the white man and take his women." And I'm like, well, I think that was the title of a chapter in one of those, Ku Klux Klan mailers that went around in the 1920s. What am I hearing?
This is rough. Oh, Boris, what are you saying, man?
And I remember him, there's some quote about him saying that, having looked at it, his response was, "This is so ridiculous, no one could take it seriously." That even at the time, he says, "This is dumb." But he didn't recognize that it could also be toxic. You know what I mean? He thought, "Wow, I'm smarter than this. Everyone must be." And I'm like, "Nah, dude. No, that is not necessarily the case." But he just sort of, again, thought no one could take anything like this seriously. This could not possibly do damage. And certainly, I would hope, viewing it today, it couldn't possibly turn minds. Like, someone's not going to watch this in 2023 and go, "Yeah, Chinese people totally commit human sacrifice and have death rays and are out to get us," Well,
yeah,
I mean,
I would hope.
Maybe I'm being too hopeful. In the midst of striking down Sheila Barton with the sword of Genghis Khan, our escaped heroes turn the death ray on, zap Fu Manchu. He drops the sword. Terry runs in, picks up the sword, and strikes down Fu Manchu with it. And then Nayland Smith and Von Berg, literally, the death ray has a plug that's plugged into the wall. Do you remember that? There's like an outlet they plug it into. And they turn the death ray on and start zapping all of Fu's assembled horde, just playing the death ray back and forth all over them as the lightning comes down and they're all struck down into smoking heaps under the death ray. And then, best of all, when they all turn to flee, they just leave the death ray on.
Yeah.
Zapping everybody in the temple down below and leave it running. Which I have to admit, after years of being a role-playing game player and playing things like, so much of this feels like bits of Masks of Nyarlathotep, the classic campaign from Call of Cthulhu. If my player characters had an option of leaving the death ray running and beating feet, they absolutely would have done that. They would have just gone, "Nope, can't take it with us, leave it running, gotta go." We don't care. It might melt a hole straight to the bottom of the earth. We don't care, we won't be here. We gotta go. Everybody's accounted for. 1, 2, 3. Okay, go, get out. Oh my God! It is an over the top, insane action film with and if it can be enjoyed on that level, and if you can laugh at the racism, you are winning. You are absolutely winning. But yeah, I know we've emphasized it a lot, but man, it is not like, it's rougher than Weissmuller Tarzan's. You know, they got plenty of opportunity to be super duper racism in those first couple of particularly the pre-Hayes ones. Although someday I need to figure out what happened. There's a point in the Weissmuller Tarzan movies where they stopped having black people as natives. I mean, the first two films, except for in the first one, there's this whole thing where they run into a tribe of not pygmies, but they literally say those aren't pygmies, those are dwarves. It's just weird where they've got all these guys who maybe later go on to work on The Wizard of Oz in blackface as the African dwarves. But before that, it was all the porters are black actors. The guide is a black guy. All the locals that they run into are actual, nobody's in blackface. And then there's this weird turn in the Tarzan movies where the black actors disappear and everybody's like white people in dark makeup, not playing black Africans, but just kind of being, they're natives.
Yeah.
Natives of what? In Tarzan's, I think it's Tarzan's Great Adventure where the Nazis turn up in Africa. Tarzan has to, Weissmuller has to kill a buttload of Nazis, and he does. He just absolutely kills there's a bit where he knocks a Nazi off a cliff and, goes to the edge of the cliff, looks to the bottom of the cliff, and it goes and just says, Nazi hyena dead now. Like very satisfied. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's great, And he suckers another Nazi into falling into a pit with a lion where the guy's got a gun and keeps shooting at him. And he's like, Nazi, and he hides behind a tree. And the guy shoots the gun and keeps following around deeper and deeper until he lures him into a pit where he falls in with some lions and is eaten alive. And I'm like, okay, talk about violence. That's post-Hayes Code. For some reason, the lost civilization the Nazis arrive, take over, and then start exploiting, they didn't use any black actors. And I don't know what the heck happened. One day I'd like to know, is this a sign of more racism? Did they get a note from somewhere south of the Mason-Dixon line saying, stop making Tarzan movies with black people? No one wants to see that. Do you know what I mean? I just don't understand why they just get erased from this, which again is just another kind of racism, is to erase people from where they should be showing up and just take it away. But anyways, we've gone on and on about that, but this film is one of those things that just it looks like it has been mined thoroughly.
Yeah.
By other people to make even better stuff. Raiders especially.
There's a lot of Raiders in this, a lot. Or I guess the other way around, wouldn't it be? A lot of this in Raiders, yeah.
But I want to take a moment to pick on Karen Morley.
Yeah, you said you had something. Yeah, let's talk about her. She
is something else. I have never seen anyone act so hard in my life. Her performance is amazing. Every line is accompanied by this weird thing she does with her shoulders. She punctuates the words with her shoulders, like, I'm going. And just, you can't stop me. Where's my father? And her shoulders keep moving with every word. And I'm like, what's with the shimmy? And she does these incredibly sharp motions, like, when she's like, cringes, like, oh, Fu Manchu. And I've heard of him. She cringes when she says the name and then stands by like up and shocked, like, he has my father. I'm like, she's in constant motion.
Except for when she should be moving around.
Yes, the one time she needs to picking up a chair and beating everybody in the room, she just goes limp. It's like, and of course she is responsible for getting some people into some of the worst stuff in this film because she convinces Terry to her fiance to betray the expedition and take the mask and sword to Fu Manchu to get her father back. And she says a whole bunch of stuff to him, like, and she talks so fast too. She's like, Teddy, you know that my father would do it for you. He wouldn't let you linger in a dungeon, And I'm thinking, yeah, he would.
yeah, I think so.
Mr. Lyon will be like, well, I'm sorry, Sheila, but you're going to have to find a new fiance because the fate of the world is in the balance, Besides, he wasn't that smart. And, there's no way that Bart would have traded the sword and the mask for Terry. But he ends up getting beaten by guys and molested by Myrna Loy and turned into a zombie with the zombie formula because she talks him into it and then lies to everybody else about where he's gone and, where the sword and mask are. And there's this moment where Nayland Smith says, "You know anything about this, Sheila?" And she does this amazing thing where she turns towards the camera and goes, "I don't know anything about that." He just looks down and towards the camera. Wow. She's a problem. She is a super problem as both a character and an actress, and I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't change a thing. She's kind of a joy to hate. I end up rooting for Fu. At least from what we can tell, Myrna Loy gets clear of that mess, so she's fine. But you'd be much better off with Myrna, Terry. I'm just saying. At least she's a go-getter, girl who knows what she wants, knows how to get it. And she can deliver a top-flight prophecy. Let's also not forget that she really knows how to deliver a prophecy, and she knocks the heck out of those insane, Asian sequined dresses with dragons on them and stuff. There's amazing.
At one point, going back to Myrna Loy, right before the prophecy is delivered, Fu Manchu introduces his hideous, ugly daughter. "Unfortunately, I don't have a son, so here's this dog of an offspring that I've created." It's like, dude, it's Myrna Loy. What are you talking about?
Well, they do that in The Good Earth. There's a
I know.
Is it The Good Earth? It's part of a bad misunderstanding of Chinese culture, but I think there's a thing where you're not supposed to brag on your achievements. You talk about your humble home. You talk about your paltry fare. I have only this to offer you, because if you are full of yourself, you'll get it. There's just generally a sense in that culture that you don't brag, you don't talk yourself up, you don't show pride, because the universe is listening. And if you say how my super hot daughter, if you say that, or say that my daughter, who's my skilled and wily offspring, who is now going to enthrall you with her prophecy, you don't do that because it would somehow be bad luck or something. I guess it's not The Good Earth, because I want to say that's Katharine Hepburn, but there is maybe it is. There's a 1930s film set in China, made in China, with Paul Mooney, where he plays a Chinese peasant, and it's the story of his rise and fall, where he goes from being a poor worker to being a landowner to losing everything again, and the only thing that matters is family. And it's this very interesting film because, it's filled with yellowface, but the thing that always got me about it was you don't know what century you're in until the locusts have eaten, or the flood has destroyed their farm, and they have to become refugees, and a steam engine is found. A steam engine train shows up out of nowhere, and suddenly you're like, oh, okay, I thought I was watching the 7th century, because they're out in the boonies on the tall and uncut of rural China, and you just don't know. But in that film, they make a big deal about that. Never, ever talk up yourself. Never do that. And perhaps when his character begins to show the sin of pride, or show that being too full of himself, treating his wife badly, only paying attention to his concubines, and, sort of shunning all the hard work that she's done to help him build his fortune, he has this big fall and has to realize, that he didn't do this on his own.
In a movie filled with so many racist stereotypes, they get one thing right.
Well, they get a thing sort of kind of right. I mean, it's based on something, but again, I suspect it is more misunderstanding of Chinese culture.
I think you're probably
filtered through more missionary stories or news stories, or things like that. More whatever passed for journalism back then. That part was, but he's not quite being, because I don't think it was necessarily, that was not necessarily just sort of him being awful to his kid, my ugly and insignificant daughter. I don't think it's quite like that, but there is a thing where you're not supposed to attack your achievements at the same time.
Gotcha.
So I don't know.
Who knows?
Certainly his relationship to Fa Lo Se is weird. where she's planning to molest Hank Hampson's character, and he's like, "Might I ask it that you delay your normal procedure? I still have use of him." And I'm like, wait, is she gonna sex him up and then murder him? Is that her normal procedure? Is that what he's saying? Could you go hold off on that for 5 minutes? I got to put the zombie go juice in his brain and make him my slave. And I'm just like, okay, Dad, their relationship is complicated.
The movie does end, I mentioned earlier, where they toss the sword over the side of a boat, and they couldn't help themselves. They've got the Asian guy on board.
The steward,
yeah, who's played by an actual Asian this time around,
Yep.
by Willie Fung,
Yep.
who they gave some terrible teeth to for some reason.
Oh, yeah, they black out one of his teeth, and he's kind of this dim-witted, happy guy, and they're like, "Look, now this is the kind of Asian everyone can agree is cool." And I'm just like, I mean, they literally do that at the end.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, wow. You just have to get one more in.
One more dig, one more.
Before you roll credits and show the MGM signal. I was like, wow, you really had to go there. And there's maybe a little shot on backlots, but everything is stage work. The boat, the tomb, even the dig site is a sound stage.
I think so, yeah.
There's a few shots in the storm where their caravan is captured by Fu's men that are shot outdoors. But everything is on the actual interior sets. And it's kind of glorious in that all those interior sets add to the unreality. Do you know what I mean? It's not, you're not in a real place. You're in this constructed space. It's embarrassing. It's one of my favorite movies. It does terrible things, but again, it has so many elements that I want to see in my pulp, in my Mummies, in my Rocketeers, in my Shadow, in those modern takes on pulp, on Indiana Jones. It has so many things that I want to see in that, but it drags along all of its baggage, like like Ebenezer Scrooge's business partner dragging all the chains of his sins along with him into the afterlife. That's exactly how it is.
I do love my pulp, and you mentioned my favorite writer earlier. I love Howard, Robert E. Howard. He's my guy. But you can't read literature or consume media from this time without catching a little case of racism. I mean, it's just so pervasive, unfortunately.
And they don't see it.
No, they don't.
They don't see it.
I talk about this too on the show when it comes to like classic cinema, and even you can do it with modern cinema. One of my favorite things about classic film, horror or otherwise, is you've got a great story, you've got performances, production design, it all looks great, but it's also kind of a mini documentary. The things that were going on in the society at the time that kind of work their way into the story or the script, and this is how people thought back then. And we can acknowledge it, but I think this movie has a lot more than just that. I would recommend this movie. If you've not seen the film, I'd recommend it. There's some really gorgeous stuff happening in it. Just know going in that you're going to get a good dose of yellow peril and yellow face and some other unpleasantness. But there's some stuff to appreciate here too, I think.
I'm scrambling here online to pull up King Kong and Son of Kong. Because one of the things I want to point out is that this doesn't universally have to be a problem. It doesn't have to be a problem, even for the 1930s. Because one of the things that I noticed when I watched both Kong and Son of Kong is that the one character who stood out for me in both movies, and it is in both movies, is the actor Victor Wong, who plays Charlie the cook on Captain Engelhorn's ship. Same actor, Frank Riker, plays Captain Engelhorn. Charlie is the one guy from the first ship, the first voyage of the Venture, who comes back, with Carl Denham as they're escaping Carl Denham's lawsuits. I love that Son of Kong starts where he is being deluged by process servers. Because of all the damage King Kong did to New York. And I'm like, that is the most realistic thing about a giant monster movie. right there.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
That the fallout is going to. So he's financially ruined, and he gets on Englehorn's ship, but they're doing so badly they have to replace all this crew. Well, in the first movie, Charlie the cook, despite the fact there are all these guys on guard duty, nobody spots the native jerking Fay Ray off the deck of the ship and rowing her back to Skull Island, except Charlie the cook. He's the only guy who spots it and raises the alarm, right? And in Son of Kong, when there's a mutiny, and I think it's interesting that the head mutineer amongst the crew who throws everybody overboard into a lifeboat is named Red. I suspect that means he's a communist. We don't need bosses anymore, you know? When they're in the lifeboat, Charlie's the guy who smuggles the rifles into the lifeboat for everyone and like lifts the canvas with his foot to show the captain, I got this covered, you know? And when they're cornered in the cave by the Strachiosaur, he's smashing it in the beak as it's coming in there with his meat cleaver from the kitchen, you know, and he survives, you know. His character is on the ball, is resourceful, is smart, and doesn't die to show how the monster works, right? If there's anybody who dies to show how the monster works, it's the one character, Ne'er-do-well, who organizes the mutiny and then is like, okay, I'm your boss now, I'm the captain, and then Red throws him overboard too, and he gets picked up in the lifeboat. He's the guy who runs away and leaves people in peril and tries to escape with the boat first, you know, and only to get eaten by a plesiosaur or something, you know. And that's a white dude, you know. He's the guy with all the bad quality. He's the coward. He's the lazy, you know, vicious, backstabbing guy. Charlie is awesome in stand-up. It is the only reason anyone's alive, okay, by the end of 2 movies, you know? And I'm like, okay, these stereotypes don't need to exist. They didn't do that for Kong and Son of Kong. And it's worth noting the years are really close. It just depends on who's handling the material, what you're going to get. You can't just kind of throw up your hands and go, well, it's that time period. How else could they have done it? They could do it different.
Well, and the people behind Kong and Son of Kong, you know, they were more worldly. They had traveled the world. They had done a lot of nature films and things like that. So they had experiences with other cultures and other peoples. And some of the film that they shot might be considered a little problematic, but it was still better than shooting on a backlot and telling Karloff to yellow face it up. So
yeah.
As far as this one goes, it is available on disc. There is a commentary track. Now, I did not watch it with the commentary track, but you were saying before we started recording that it's really good.
It's really good, and it talks a lot about how there's a VHS copy that I had seen originally, and a version that was shown on TV that was being seen, and these were all highly edited. They were edited to take out the most virulent racism.
Sure.
Like the line, kill the white man and take his women, or, you know, I'm going to destroy your whole hideous white race. Oh, that was it. Sheila Barton calls Fu Manchu a hideous yellow monster at some point. They took all that out. And the reason they took it out is that in 1942 or 43, there were Chinese American organizations in the United States that were lobbying like, hey, since we're all fighting the Japanese, maybe we might want to tone down the anti-Chinese racism. What do you say, kid? Just because I can only imagine that despite the fact that every Japanese person has just been hauled off to Arizona or the deserts of Western Washington and Oregon or wherever people were dragged off to, that there are still plenty of people who can't tell the difference between a Japanese person and who they shouldn't be afraid of anyways, but then all the other Asian citizens of the United States. We certainly would have had Filipinos in the United States. That had been an American colony since the turn of the century, and we certainly had plenty of Chinese citizens in the United States before then. So they lobbied to have those parts taken out of the film and succeeded, and it stayed out for a long time, but when they restored the film, they put it back in. And I'm kind of glad they did, because I always think it's a bad idea to whitewash how bad we were back then.
Yeah.
You really need to know how bad it was to see that, you know, what people were fighting against and what the shape of the struggle when it comes to winning hearts and minds and changing attitudes was way back then. And, it's just super important to know that, yeah, Grandma and Grandpa didn't have it easy, kids. It was serious. It was absolutely serious. If this passed as pop culture entertainment and nobody blinked at it, then, yeah, it was going to get even rougher out there in other social settings or work settings, or heaven forbid you encounter law enforcement in that time period.
Oh, no, yeah.
It's an amazing commentary set. They do a lot of interesting stuff. One of my favorite things is that the fellow who plays Nayland Smith, Louis Stone, apparently he was old enough that I think he served as like an orderly in this. They say he worked as an orderly in the Spanish-American War.
Oh, wow, okay.
And he worked with Walter Reed, Reed Hospital. Walter Reed was the guy who invented how to vaccinate against yellow fever, which killed all these people in the Spanish-American War. And he's the guy who realized, okay, that was all of our casualties. It's some crazy number, like 80% of the deaths in America fighting that war was from yellow fever. And he's the guy who isolated it as a mosquito-borne disease, and things like that. That's why the hospital was named after him. Well, Louis Stone worked for him at that time as a young man, and at some point is tapped in his career to play Walter Reed in a movie about Walter Reed searching for and finding the cure for yellow fever, which again was just a weird little detail that came out of the film that I thought was, I never would have guessed. I've only ever seen him in one other film, a movie called China Seas with Clark Gable.
Okay.
And she was one of the original blonde bombshells. She was in Hell's Angels, in Howard Hughes' film Hell's Angels. I'm forgetting her name, and she's a much more important actress as far as I'm concerned than Clark Gable. But Louis Stone plays one of the men on this Chinese ship, or this steamship that Clark Gable's the captain of. They are smuggling. I think Wallace Beery is also in the movie as well, playing a guy who's going to betray the ship to some Malay pirates, and they put the Malay boot on Clark Gable to get him to reveal where the gold is on the ship, which is just iron boot that they just tightened it down until it breaks his feet. That's another strange little weird pre-Hays Code film that has a scene where Clark Gable has hidden the gold inside a giant steam wheel, like one of those giant pieces of construction equipment, right? That is attached to the deck of the ship that they are taking wherever they're taking it. And he's put the gold inside the wheel so no one will find it. And at some point during a storm, as the ship is rolling around, it breaks loose, and the steam wheel roller, I should say, starts rolling around the deck of the ship, crushing all of the lowest grade passengers who don't have any place to hide. And Louis Stone is like, quick, we've got to open the side of the ship and let it roll off the ship, before it keeps killing people. And Clark Gable's like, no, you fool. They're trying to batten this thing down so it doesn't roll off. And that's how Wallace Beery realizes that the gold must be inside the steamroller. And before we're done, Louis Stone's character takes a bag full of Mills bombs after he's been shot and horribly wounded, and throws himself and the bag, I think, down into the Malay pirate ship to explode the whole ship. And it's not bad pulp. It's not bad pulp, but you kind of weirdly have to work your way through the female lead in it. Yeah, Jean Harlow.
Oh, okay.
Jean Harlow is supposed to be this big sex symbol. And her performances in Hell's Angels being the worst girlfriend ever. She's terrible in that, and she kind of plays a terrible character in China Seas. You're like, what does Clark? I don't get it, Clark. Why is Jean Harlow cool? I don't get it. I mean, she wears a lot of low-cut stuff, and there are and not a lot of underwear because it's pre-Hays. But I'm not seeing it. She's just this terrible, high, squeaky voiced woman who is just awful. There's a scene where she gets jealous at some woman on the boat, and almost shoots her in the head with the skeet shooting shotgun, where they're like shooting off the sides of the boat, and she gets jealous of somebody paying attention to Clark Gable, and just boom, like knocks her hat off. She's like, "Oh, sorry." But anyways,
yeah,
there's so much baggage. There's so much baggage, sir.
I know.
And they don't have to be, because, hey, who saves the day at the end of Creature?
Right?
Do the white dudes? No, dude, no. The Brazilian ship captain and his crew saved the day.
Yep.
While the white guys are like, one of them's already been turned into fish food, and the other one is looking to get Cuisinart by those giant fish claws. Nope. Those are the guys who saved the day at the end. And again, doesn't have to be like that, kids. You can always do better.
All right, well, this has been awesome. I've been wanting to get you on the show like this for a while, so this was cool. This will not be the only time you're on. We'll have you back on down the line.
If people can stand it.
No, this has been fun. I've had a really good time.
I'm an acquired taste. I'm not saying people are like, won't that guy shut up? The show's been going on 1 hour and 42 minutes. What's going on here? Derek, put a cork in him.
So, well, okay, fine. We'll put a cork in it for now. But in the meantime, do you have anything going on right now with Delta Green or anything else going on that you want to let people know about?
The only things that are going on right now with Delta Green is that Caleb Stokes, who's an incredibly gifted and disturbing writer, has a new Delta Green campaign. We haven't done a lot of campaigns. We've mostly done standalone scenarios for the role-playing game Delta Green, where you play government agents assigned to not only stop unnatural and supernatural threats to the United States, its citizens, and the world, but also to cover them up, lest anyone ever get the idea that, we all know it's pretty bad when some incel gets access to, an assault rifle at their local school, but if they can summon Cthulhu or, a horde of plasma-based entities to, burn down the town because they're angry about their dating situation just by lighting a few candles and drawing a few, geometric shapes on the floor and chanting in a dead language, then, that would be bad too. That would be also bad. So Delta Green not only stops the problem, but also makes sure you never knew there was a problem in the first place, all at a terrible human cost. And so, which is what we now call fun in role playing. Rather than power fantasies, we have to save the world from horrifying monsters, then go home and not tell our families we did it, and drink to forget. Just like real life. We got a campaign coming out from Caleb called God's Teeth, and the basic premise behind the campaign is that you do a good thing, and then you pay for it. For the next 20 years. You find an evil, horrible cult doing evil, horrible cult stuff. They run an orphanage, which they treat as a supply of batteries for fueling their supernatural endeavors. And you rescue all these kids from the clutches of the cult, and that seems like a good idea. We've done a good thing. We can feel good about ourselves. 20 years later, those kids have grown up, and the problem continues, and you've got to deal with the fallout of what's happened. This good deed you've done will be following you the rest of your days. That's going to be coming up from Caleb. It's going through final approvals right now. It is a gorgeously written and horrifyingly plotted Delta Green campaign, and beautifully illustrated. It gave me the huzz just reading it. Caleb just managed to hurt me just by editing it. So I'm pretty sure that when you inflict it on your gaming players, they will probably not forgive you anytime soon. So I guess that's a success. And
for Delta Green, yeah, I think so.
I think that for playing Delta Green, I guess that's a success. But anyways, that's the big thing that's coming up real soon. But go buy Delta Green. Go look at people playing it online on YouTube. There's some Brits who are running my campaign Iconoclasts, where you have to find your way into the city of Mosul in 2016 when it's occupied by ISIS, and to find the supernatural threat that ISIS accidentally released because they were so busy smashing ancient artifacts and smashing things that were un-Islamic that they accidentally released a horrifying entity from beyond time and space. And yes, I will admit that was clearly something I wrote because I wished it was happened when I watched them bulldoze Nineveh back in 2015 and 2016. I was like, oh, please, why can't archaeology work like it does in movies? You know, or do you release the thing from beyond time and space that eats their face or something, or at least there'd be some mummies or something, or the Jewel of the Seven Stars or something. Something bad would happen to people who profane tombs, you know? But sadly, no, nothing happens except history gets erased. But I wrote Iconoclasts as a way to have my own vicarious revenge for the damage done to places like, they didn't get around to Petra, but they got around to damaging Persepolis, I believe, in Syria, and Nineveh in Iraq. So definitely go check out how that's going on YouTube with those guys. Just, type in Delta Green Iconoclasts. It'll come up. I promise. There's plenty of Delta Green material to be found on the internets.
Well, we'll make sure there's some links in the show notes too, to delta-green.com. And like I said, we'll get you back on the show down the line and find something else to talk about that maybe isn't nearly as racist.
That's going to be real easy, unless we decide we're going to review Triumph of the Will. Lenny Riefenstahl films. I'm pretty sure we can find something that's slightly less racist than this movie. Holy
I think
cow.
so.
Oof.
Oh boy.
It's a lot, kids. It's a lot.
Once again, thank you for being here. I know I say it every week, and I mean it even more week after week after week. Thank you for being here. Thanks for being part of Monster Kid Radio by listening to the show, downloading the show, reviewing the show, and sharing the show. We have a Facebook page, a Facebook group, and a Twitter. You can go and retweet and share posts there. You can join the conversations that we have over on our Discord or our Patreon or our Reddit. Just thank you for participating with Monster Kid Radio in any way that you do. You can also go over to our website at monsterkidradio.net to find our contact information. You can email us at monsterkidradio@gmail.com, or you can call and leave us a voicemail at 360-524-2484, and we'll include your feedback in an upcoming episode of the podcast. Of course, there's links in our show notes over there at monsterkidradio.net, getting you to anything that we talked about here on the show. If there's something online about it, you're going to find it over there, including our Amazon affiliate links. Please consider using our Amazon affiliate links if you're going to do shopping of any kind at Amazon. It helps us out quite a bit. You're also going to find links to our Twitch channel, our Twitch stream, which is twitch.tv/monsterkidradio. Haven't been doing a lot of live stuff there lately. I like doing that. It's just the last time that we did when we didn't have a lot of people show up, and it's just kind of hard with all the moving parts happening here right now at Monster Kid Radio and Team Death to schedule that kind of time. But it doesn't mean I'm going to leave you hanging. You can go and watch movies anytime the Twitch channel is up and running. As of right now, we're doing a bunch of Boris Karloff stuff. So hop on over to twitch.tv/monsterkidradio to watch some Boris Karloff classics. Some really cool stuff happening right there. I'm going to leave that going for the next couple of days, and then sometime next week I'm going to switch it out for another 10 to 15 hour block of movies and entertainment that'll play on another loop for about another week or so. Head on over there and check it out, and even chat it up a little bit. There's a little chat there. It's the only time I'm going to encourage you to chat or talk during a movie. So check that out. What's coming up next week here on the show? Well, last weekend, some of you may know that we had CouveCon happen up here in Vancouver, at the Vancouver Mall, and Beth and I were able to have a panel called Meet Monster Kid Radio. Yes, we've been going for 10 years. Kind of weird to be kind of doing an introductory kind of thing, but honestly, here in Vancouver, we're an unknown quantity. Down in Portland, we do all the conventions that we can, and, even some of the ones that don't book us, we tend to crash. But up here in Vancouver, there's just not nearly as many opportunities for Monster Kid Radio to get out there and do what we do. So we had a Meet Monster Kid Radio panel at CouveCon, and we recorded it. So that's what you're going to hear next week here on the show. The week after that, maybe we'll have the Rose City Comic-Con recording. So stay tuned for that as well. And then, as we've discussed in the past, we've got 2 big themed months coming up here on Monster Kid Radio. November is going to be Nosferatu November, where we're going to be doing nothing but vampire films. And I can tell you right now that Dominique Lamzes is booked to talk about Blackula here on the show. That's going to be fun. And then December is Dino-cember, nothing but dinosaur movies here on the show in December. And we've got Stephen D. Sullivan and Robert Kelly lined up to talk about some things there. We're still looking to fill in the blanks with guests and that sort of thing. So that is just something I'm really looking forward to. I haven't done a themed month here in a long time, so that should be a blast. So that's all that's coming up here on the show. You know, I think next year we may even see some new themed months and some new things happening, and should be a good time. Stick around. Make sure you subscribe and listen to the show and let people know about it so we can continue to grow. I mentioned Team Death a second ago. Remember, we've got a Team Death YouTube channel. There's a link in the show notes, of course, but just look up Team Death over on YouTube, and Death is spelled D-E-T-H. That's D-E from Derek, T-H from Beth, and you'll find us. We just launched a vlog, but we've also been doing movie reviews and other things over there as well. So make sure you check that out. If you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe and thumbs up and follow and do whatever it is you're supposed to do on all the social media platforms, anywhere you find Monster Kid Radio. Also, make sure you check out the band Cannibal Surf. I think it's really cool that they gave us permission to play their music here on the show. I am proud to say that all the music we play here on the show, we always get permission to play. And, always try to send people to the band's website. So go check out Cannibal Surf on Bandcamp or look them up on Facebook because, well, they do some pretty cool stuff. Let them know that Monster Kid Radio sent you. Until next week, Monster Kid Radio is a registered service mark of Monster Kid Radio, LLC. All original content of Monster Kid Radio by Monster Kid Radio, LLC is licensed by a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 3.0 unported license. Of course, that doesn't apply to the song Action Scene. That is copyright 2020. Cannibal Surf. My name is Derek M. Cook. I'll talk to everybody next week. Ciao.